you there. Yes, you. Do you enjoy any of the following? Sci-fi, fantasy, hard fiction, speculative technology, intricate alternate histories, pantheons, portals, world building, genetic modification, extraterrestrials, magic, action-packed narratives, textbooks, telepathy, and time travel. The Omnivermis Mythos has them all. So here is just kind of a brief on the project's cosmology. So we as humans generally see time as linear, right? That's why we call it a timeline. But you know what else is linear? Let's see if you can guess. A worm. So that's the basis of this project, is that timelines are actually inside of these giant cosmic worms. So it's called a univermis, vermis meaning worm in Latin. And we generally, like I said, we think of time as linear, but that's what we, in this project, we call it relative time. So relative time is like, I'm in the future, that would mean you're in my past, and everything's kind of relative, that's why it's called that. But there's also another dimension of time. So far we have that one, just relative time. Then there is also absolute time. So absolute time basically means that if you were to time travel, then you would time travel over absolute time. That would be the amount of time it takes for you to actually move. But it's a second dimension, so that means you can actually have higher dimensional beings that live kind of occupying that space. Now there is actually, in the Omnivermis project, there is a third dimension of time, but we'll get to that in a minute. And the only reason there's a third one is so then you can have parallel timelines, which is a pretty cool concept. But anyway, yeah, there's 3 temporal dimensions, 3 spatial dimensions. So one thing that you might not know maybe about worms, or specifically oceanic worms, or specifically Polychaete worms, which you might not have known existed, is they actually have very distinct nervous systems. So they generally tend to have around 4 eyes. So let's see if I can draw those there. Just pretend those are the 4 eyes. And then they've got like little antennae that kind of grow forward off their bodies. And that's how they sense. That's how they go around, see their environment. But remember, we said that these cosmic worms, those are the timeline, which means if there's the nervous system, there has to be some sort of consciousness, some sort of intelligence there. So like I had said, the worms have 4 eyes, so that takes the form, it's manifested as the 4 visions, which for each univermis, they have these 4 beings that are super powerful, able to reshape entire galaxies with little to no effort put in. Then there's about 9 or 10 antennae imps, each one generated by an antenna. And so those ones, they're kind of like the visions where there's a finite number, but you know they're pretty powerful. Now there are also 2 organs called palps on a Polychaete worm. Typically they're kind of like fleshy protrusions that come off the head. But in general, in the univermises, what those things do is they generate things called palpantheons. So palpantheons are basically like if you have a group of smaller entities or weak deities, and they're different species and they're assigned different tasks. They look at relative time, remember that's our timeline, the same way that we might look at a rug that's being unfurled. So they can see the timeline grow. From their perspective, it looks like the timeline is slowly adding on to the end. But what that really means, the main implication of that is at any given point, there's always an end of the future. That means it's kind of hard to predict what happens next, even if you do dwell in absolute time. And the reason I use the analogy of the rug is because they don't know what's going to come next on the timeline. They just know that they can go back along the rug, walk to the start, and kind of alter things. Maybe like be sewing or knitting or something. But yeah, so the verminions, that's what they're called. Vermis, again, means worm. They're minions of the worm. Those are the things that make up the Palpantheons. They're often responsible for engineering different life forms. They can send mortals on different quests throughout time to fight these cancerous growths that grow throughout the universes occasionally. And paradoxes are actually like a sign of there used to be a cancerous kind of timeline tissue there, but then it got healed over. So paradoxes are okay as long as they don't have any closed ends. That means they're really fine. There is one more thing I would like to bring to your attention, and that is the concept of the alternate universes that I talked about. So let's just say for a moment that you were to take one of these universes and cut it in half, right? So first you'd have this end, and then you would have the other end. We'll just draw that here. So what's going to happen is, because remember, with polychaete worms, and if you haven't done research on them during this video, that's good, because that means you've been listening, but polychaete worms are able to regrow whenever you cut them in half. So if we take a timeline and we cut it in half, then each end is going to regrow part of the timeline. So we got this one up here. This one basically regenerates a new past, but it can only go up to a certain point, because then if it went too far, it wouldn't be able to remember what happens. So up here is like a freeze frame of the start of the timeline, and then it just keeps going. It uses the old future and grows a new past, but it's also possible for then it to keep adding on with this new growth, and then, it just continues as normal. Now this one, it's able to regrow an alternate future because, okay, that looks horrible, but you can see there's those different lines, and it's got the same start, but then an alternate timeline. So that's kind of the third dimension of time I talked about, where, because if I have a bunch of lines, then that has to be on a plane. That's at least 2 dimensions. Then we throw in the absolute time. That makes it those 3 dimensions. And there is a lot more lore on this project, a lot of more information and different brainstorming that I've done. So yeah, just whenever you get the chance, try and watch some videos. I will try my best to release 1 or 2 videos every once in a while. If you would like to explore the multivermis with me, make sure to like, comment, subscribe, ring the notification bell, and then I will see you later.